In most countries, trains are loud. People talk. They laugh with friends after work. Someone scrolls through videos at full volume. A phone rings somewhere in the background. The noise becomes part of the journey itself. But in Japan, something feels strangely different. A train filled with hundreds of people can become almost completely silent. No loud conversations, no phone calls, no music leaking from headphones. Sometimes, the only sound is the soft vibration of the tracks beneath the floor. And for many foreigners visiting Japan for the first time, that silence feels almost unsettling. Not peaceful, not relaxing, but strangely unnatural. Everyone inside the train has silently agreed to follow a rule no one ever explained. People stand shoulder to shoulder, yet barely acknowledge each other's existence. Many stare quietly at the floor. Others disappear into glowing phone screens. Some close their eyes and pretend to sleep. And almost nobody speaks. At first, it can feel cold, even lonely. But the silence inside Japanese trains is not accidental. It reveals something much deeper about Japanese society. Because in Japan, silence is not always emptiness. Sometimes, silence is respect. Every morning in Tokyo, millions of people enter one of the busiest subway systems on Earth. The stations are crowded, the platforms are packed. Office workers move quickly through narrow hallways beneath the city. Students in uniforms wait beside exhausted businessmen holding briefcases. And when the train doors open, people enter with almost mechanical precision. Despite the enormous crowds, the atmosphere remains strangely calm. For outsiders, this can feel almost impossible. How can a city this crowded feel this quiet? Part of the answer comes from a Japanese cultural concept known as meiwaku. The word roughly translates to causing trouble for other people. From a very young age, Japanese children are taught to avoid disturbing the people around them. Do not speak too loudly. Do not create unnecessary conflict. Do not force your emotions onto strangers. And most importantly, do not interrupt social harmony. Inside Japanese trains, this invisible social rule becomes extremely powerful. Talking loudly is considered inconsiderate. Phone calls are discouraged. Even small sounds can attract uncomfortable attention. In many train cars across Japan, people switch their phones into silent mode before boarding. Some trains even display reminders asking passengers not to speak on the phone at all. For many Japanese commuters, the silence is not awkward, it is polite. It is a form of mutual respect shared between strangers. Everyone protects everyone else's invisible personal space. Not physical space, because Tokyo rarely has enough of that, but mental space, emotional space, the right to exist quietly without disturbance. In many Western countries, public spaces are treated as social spaces. People casually start conversations, friends laugh loudly together, strangers interact without thinking too much about it. But in Japan, public spaces often become private mental spaces. The train is not a place for self-expression, it is a temporary escape from the pressure of daily life. A quiet transition between work and home, between emotional exhaustion and responsibility. For some people, it may be the only peaceful moment they experience all day. Tokyo is one of the largest cities on Earth. Millions of people move through it every single day. The streets are crowded, the restaurants are full, trains are overflowing with passengers. And yet, many people living there describe an overwhelming feeling of loneliness. Because loneliness is not always about being physically alone. Sometimes it is the feeling of emotionally disappearing inside a crowd. Inside Japanese trains, that feeling becomes strangely visible. People avoid eye contact, not because they are rude, but because acknowledging strangers too directly can feel emotionally intrusive. Many commuters quietly retreat into themselves. Some listen to music, some read books, others stare silently through rain-covered train windows while the city passes by outside. For a few brief moments, the train becomes less like public transportation and more like a moving room filled with private worlds. Everyone traveling together, yet emotionally somewhere else entirely. But silence inside Japanese trains also reveals something darker about modern life in Japan, because over time, the pressure to remain emotionally controlled can slowly change the way people interact with each other. Japan is often admired for its politeness, its order, its discipline, its calm public spaces, and in many ways, those things are real. But beneath that calm surface, many people quietly struggle with emotional isolation. Long working hours have become normal across much of Japanese society. Some office workers leave home before sunrise and return late at night. Tiny apartments become little more than places to sleep. Days begin to repeat themselves. Train, work, train, sleep, leap. Then everything starts again the next morning. Inside crowded Tokyo trains, you can sometimes see the exhaustion written across people's faces. A businessman asleep while standing, a student staring silently out the window, someone slowly scrolling through their phone with empty eyes. And despite being surrounded by people, many commuters remain emotionally alone. In Japan, there is often a strong cultural pressure to avoid burdening others with personal feelings. Many people learn to hide stress quietly, to endure discomfort privately, to remain composed even during emotional pain. Over time, silence becomes more than politeness. It becomes emotional armor. For many foreigners visiting Japan for the first time, the silence inside trains becomes one of the most unforgettable parts of the country. Not the neon lights, not the technology, not even the crowded streets of Tokyo, but the quiet. Many tourists describe feeling strangely nervous during their first train ride in Japan. Some become hyper-aware of every small sound they make. A cough, a bag zipper, footsteps, even speaking softly with friends can suddenly feel inappropriate. Because when an entire train car remains silent, the smallest noise feels amplified. For people coming from louder cultures, the experience can feel deeply unfamiliar. In cities like New York, London, or Paris, public transportation is often chaotic and noisy. Conversations overlap. Music leaks from headphones. Strangers argue. Friends laugh loudly together. Noise becomes part of the atmosphere. But Japan feels different. The silence creates a strange psychological effect. It forces people inward. Many foreigners say Japanese trains feel less like public transportation and more like libraries moving through the city. And perhaps that is why so many visitors become fascinated by them. Because the silence feels almost impossible in a modern world filled with constant stimulation. No endless notifications, no desperate need to be noticed. Just people quietly existing beside one another for a few brief moments before disappearing back into the city again. And maybe that is what makes Japanese trains so fascinating. Not simply the silence itself, but what the silence represents. In a world where people constantly compete for attention, Japan created a culture that values restraint, where disappearing quietly into the crowd is often considered more respectful than demanding space for yourself. For some people, that silence feels peaceful, safe, even comforting. But for others, it can feel deeply lonely, because silence always carries two meanings: connection and distance, peace and isolation, respect and emotional suppression. Perhaps the quiet train is more than transportation. Perhaps it is a reflection of modern society itself. Millions of people moving together through enormous cities, while quietly carrying private worlds no one else can fully see. And maybe that is why Japanese trains leave such a lasting impression on so many visitors. Because for a few brief moments, inside a crowded train filled with strangers, people are forced to confront something modern life rarely allows anymore. Silence. Real silence. And in that silence, many people begin to notice something unexpected. Not just Japan, but themselves.